It's all about how is transformation possible without losing orientation.
We took the whole world, we split it into 57 trillion squares, and we labelled every square with 3 words from the dictionary. I brought Justine along as my +1, and she's one of the people who is inspiring not just because of work, although her work is very inspiring from an environmental and green and future perspective, but because every time I see Justine, I feel inspired to be better in my life.
I'm super excited to be here. I'm super excited to share that conversation with Clare and with you, Judith.
Very warm welcome again for Meet My Green +1. And I'm really happy today that we have a wonderful episode theme with Find Your Way. And it's all about how is transformation possible without losing orientation. And as you know, it's pretty easy. We asked someone of our community to bring someone who inspired them most to getting greener. And we play with them a question tag game, which means they get 2 words and have to decide one. And hopefully we get them known a little bit better than we already do. And I'm really happy that we have Clare Jones, CCO of What3Words this time on board. We know each other because you have a speaker last year at the first GREENTECH Festival. So it would be just amazing if you could do a short introduction about yourself.
Yeah, so hi, lovely to be here. So I'm Clare. I work at What3Words, and at What3Words we invented a global address system. So we took the whole world, we split it into 57 trillion squares, and we labelled every square with 3 words from the dictionary. So you can tell someone to meet you at Apple Banana Spoon, or maybe you're finding a charging point for your electric car at Pigs, Bananas, Blankets, could be anything like this. So that's the idea. And so What3Words is being used in all kinds of ways, but one of the things we love seeing it being used for is when delivery companies are using it to try and reduce miles traveled. So they're trying to help improve their sustainability as businesses. It's also used in all kinds of ways, from emergency services to giving people access to addresses in places like informal settlements or slums or refugee camps. So it's a whole range of uses, from that to being able to use it in a Mercedes car. So it could be anything, but very happy to be here. And in fact, I brought Justine along as my +1. She's somebody I know as a dear friend in my personal life, and she's one of the people who is inspiring not just because of work, although her work is very inspiring from an environmental and green and future perspective, but because every time I see Justine, I feel inspired to be better in my life. Justine has this very special power which she makes you feel not guilty, but inspired to do better. And I think that's been amazing. So we live near each other, and Justine helps me just in everyday ways be better at being a better contributor to the world. And so that's why I wanted to bring Justine along.
So Justine, this was a wonderful pitch about you. Anything to add from your side?
Oh, that's just absolutely lovely. Thanks, Clare. Yeah, just a little bit about me. So I'm Justine. In my professional world, I'm head of sustainability at Depop, which is a fashion marketplace, and especially targeting the young generation. So we have about more than 20 million users now who mainly resell existing clothes. So my sustainability hat is definitely driven by this mission of extending the life of clothes and reducing the impact of fashion. But it obviously overspills in my personal life, where my mantra, and as Clare said, and I'm super happy she said that, is all about getting people on their sustainability journey, and wherever they are, try to get everyone to feel empowered and also concerned about the state of the world, and try to start somewhere. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here and super excited to share that conversation with Clare and with you, Judith.
Wonderful. So I would say we start with the game as discussed. 2 words. You decide 1 word and explain just a little bit why. And yeah, hopefully we get you to know a little bit better. So the first pair is rebellion or rules.
Claudia, you want to go?
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to go for rebellion. I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, I couldn't really say rules when we're reinventing addresses and taking them and doing them something totally differently. And I think I can guess what Justine's saying, but Justine, go.
I'm definitely going to say rebellion as well. I'm a bit conflicted because I'm a very law-abiding person usually, but most recently in the past year or so, I dipped my toes in activism and especially joined a lot of actions with Extinction Rebellion, because now is the time. And I think when you've exhausted all the options of, especially for me as a sustainability professional, working with big companies, then working with the startup world, trying to get the matter in your own hands and acting as a concerned citizen is something that I had not done before. And I feel that we all need to do a little bit of it and not see activism and activists as some people who just hug trees or are marginal people. Actually, it can just be each and every one of us. And that was my realization the past 1 or 2 years. So yeah, definitely rebellion. It's a work in progress because I'm constantly battling with myself, but I feel like we need to go in that direction to move the needle.
That's true. So details or big picture?
You go first this time, Justine.
I will say details, because as much as the big picture is super important and the stories, the narratives are important to get people on board, we also need to be quite critical in how we allocate resources. And that works for your personal life, as a company, as governments. There are some things that need to be prioritized if we want to tackle climate change, social inequalities, and we have a limited amount of time. So I think, yes, the details will always prevail. And then I can, get around some brilliant marketing people to help me with crafting the big picture. But I will always try to focus on the details.
Well, what about you? I'm curious. I mean, you started with the detail, but you created amazing big pictures. So what is your choice?
Yeah, I think a similar kind of conflict, which is that I'm obsessed with big picture, and I think ambition we need to be ambitious, and big pictures help us do that. But I think big picture is easy and detail is hard. And I think it's really easy for people to say, I support a more sustainable planet, and that's a big picture, and I feel like we can all get behind that. But the details can be the hard thing, and that's where it takes the work, because that's where you've got to make decisions. It's so much easier to make a big proclamation and make big generic statements and not feel personally accountable or responsible. Whereas when you've got detail, you've got to actually make decisions, you've got to act on them, you've got to move things forward, and you can't just say, there's this thing in the future, which I believe we're building towards, but you've actually got to feel responsible for each step along the way.
Yeah, I agree. Because when it's everyone's problem, it's no one's problem.
Yeah. That's true. So, vintage or new?
Okay, I should probably go on that one. Definitely vintage. Although vintage has different meaning, and I think it's restrictive to some extent, because if we go into the detail of what is vintage, it needs to be more than 20 years old, and I think that we just need to, I would switch it to secondhand.
Yes.
Because secondhand means we're not depriving the planet from resources. The resources have already been transformed, extracted. So let's basically do with what we have. And that circular mindset is the one that I think everyone should embrace more, or thrive to embrace. Because we are literally cutting the branch in which we're sitting right now. So it's very important to use rather than produce new. So 100% secondhand.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on this one. I think that the circular thing of our world, it's something we should be thinking about a lot more, about where things come from and where they end up. And I think particularly, I do feel like as a consumer, I'm hearing a lot more about where things come from, which is good. I'd still like more of it, but it's coming. But the other side of that, the where things end up, that feels much harder to know. And, you know, I'm someone who's got an old laptop under my bed because I don't know how to dispose of it sustainably. It's something that doesn't do the job I need it to do, but I don't really know what to do with it. And it's actually been under my bed the last 2 flats I've been in. I take it with me. And like, this is crazy. This is, and of course, like, there's things I could be doing better there, but I think that for me, that we've got to have this thinking about where things come from and where they go, and how we reuse and make things circular in that journey.
Yeah.
In fashion, there's an example, a company I recently invested in called On Loan, and they are doing fashion rental for people who want to be able to, you know, if I'm doing a speech, maybe I want a nice dress so I feel confident and excited, but do I need to buy that new dress? If I'm going to wear it once a year or twice a year or for a wedding, you know, maybe I can rent it. So On Loan do subscription, so you can subscribe and then they'll send you clothes, and you're basically sharing them with a load of people you don't know. But it's that world which starts us to basically think more responsibly about how we're consuming. And I think that's why I'm with you on this, of the secondhand and the reusing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is a good match to this one that we discussed, but it's quite hard because fast or slow? Claire, maybe you will begin, because I mean, What3Words increases speed and efficiency, but yeah, just start. What do you pick?
I think nobody in my life would believe me if I said slow. Unfortunately, my whole life is pretty much on ×2. So although that's not always a good thing, right? There's lots of downsides of fast. And I think in the world, we're suffering a lot from some downsides of doing things too fast and moving fast and breaking things along the way. But I also think there are lots of positive things about fast. I think we have to be fast and we have to change things quickly. So even though in the world of travel, I think slow travel is really interesting, and slow fashion is really interesting, and slow food are very interesting. But I also think there's definitely space for ×2, especially when you're trying to create change. I think, as Justine said, we haven't got unlimited time. We're going to run out of time to make change, so we've got to do it quickly.
That's true. Justine, what is your pick?
I will pick slow, but I will pick slow and to echo what Clara said. At an individual level, we definitely need to slow down. So I will pick slow lifestyles, because that's very important. And I think we need to reconnect with what's important in life. And it's not necessarily, and it should not be consuming stuff. It should be connecting with people. It should be feeding your body with things that are good for you. And only buying what really, really is necessary and like brings you or sparks joy. But I agree with Claire that from a climate perspective and a social change perspective, we just don't have that time. So that's where the fast needs to happen. And just to put that in perspective, we have now 10 years, literally, to make drastic changes if we want to tackle climate change and avoid tipping points where basically the world as we know it will not be possible, and we will not be able to sustain the lifestyles we have. So we're literally running out of time from that perspective. So I think it's going to be two things at the same time, like awakening at individual level, and then very, very fast change at institutional and company level side. And we need both.
True. So the next one would be individual or uniform?
Individual or uniform?
Yes. So, I mean, What3Words, a system, allows worldwide uniformity to be more efficient. That's the idea behind this pair. And as we discussed, slow lifestyle, slow fashion expresses more individuality. So what would be the right pick for you?
I can pick that one, Claire. Well, for me, but also for Depop, the company I work for, it's definitely going to be individual, because I think, and it feeds back to that point I was making earlier on the narratives and the stories behind it. If we want to get people on board, they need to see themselves in the process. And one of the beauty of Depop is our community. We would not exist without them. They're making the change, they're driving the change. They're their own entrepreneurs, and they push us to do better. When we're not good enough, they call us out and we act upon it. But there's that driving force. So I feel that uniformity would make us lose that edge. And I feel that we need to empower everyone, and we need them to meet us where they are on their sustainability journey. And with a one-size-fits-all approach, it just doesn't work, because people are all different. We're not rational. So we need to talk to the emotional part of people's brain, which is why I think individuality must be the primary angle.
I think there's something really interesting there around when you look about something that creates connection, and that in that way, something that's universal can be really powerful. And I think What3Words is a great example of this, where the fact that I have this international system, the fact that it can work the same in Japan and it can work the same in the UK, might mean I feel more confident about going to stay with a local person in Japan than staying in a Hilton hotel, because I know actually I'm not going to get lost. So it can inspire you to be confident. And this is one of the things we're working with tourism agencies on, is if people feel confident and they feel supported to travel, they're not going to go to the same old places which have had too much tourism already and are actually in lots of cases destroying some really amazing natural heritage. Instead, they're able to say, here's a place you can explore. Here's a place you can have an individual, unique, slower experience, because we're going to support you to feel confident, to know that if you get lost, you can explain where you are, to know that you can be told, here is this amazing hidden gem of nature that you should explore. So that's one side of it. And then I think the other side is, as a design principle, I think when you're looking at the universal, it's really important to care about the human and the individual. So for us, the example of that is the way we think about language. So although we say, you know, we're trying to do something to create a universal system for addresses, this is used by humans who speak very different languages. And so every time we launch a new language, it's a huge amount of work for us to work with people who speak that language, and not just native speakers, but actual linguists who understand the nuance of that language and can help make sure that the system works well for people who speak that language. So for example, if you look at French, you'll find that common French words are in French-speaking cities around the world. So that be Paris or Kinshasa or places in Canada. And whereas if you look at, I don't know, if you go to the middle of Siberia, you've actually got quite long French words, because there aren't that many French speakers in the middle of Siberia. So although it's a universal system, we've really tried to think about it from a very human-centered perspective in the design of it.
So how many languages in the system already?
I think it's 45 launched, maybe a couple more. We're quite a few launching at the moment, so hard to keep track these days now. It's so many.
And which one was the hardest?
Oh, it's such a big question. They're hard for loads of different reasons. So French is hard, for example, because they have lots of homophones, so words that sound the same, and we can't have those in the list because it's about being able to speak and communicate. Whereas Chinese was complex because it's an incredibly complex language, and thinking about how that works. Also Arabic was really hard because Arabic is spoken in different ways in lots of countries. So when you look at a language that's spoken, you think about, you know, the Arabic spoken in Morocco, the Arabic that's spoken in versus, you know, Arabic spoken in other parts in the Gulf, for example. It really changes the way people interact with that language. So for us, it was really important to do justice to that. So those languages were very hard. But it really, it really depends. There are so many differences. I mean, one of my favorite examples is, I think it's in Tamil. We have no word for turtle in the Tamil word list. And it's not a swear word, but there's an idea that having a turtle in your house is such bad luck, you wouldn't want it in your address. So we took out the word turtle. So it's that level of complexity that you're going through with every language. But honestly, the most amazing learning. And Jamie, who's our head of languages, I always think, if I want to read a book by Jamie one day about all the stuff we've learned, as he's done languages.
I can imagine. That's crazy. Okay, so one last pair. Underdog or big brand?
Oh.
Justine, would you like to start?
Yes.
Or do you need a moment? No. So
no,
start.
I I will always go for the underdog. That feeds also to the slow and the being a conscious consumer and active citizen is about, I think we need to pair and have that vision of sustainability as something that covers both the environment and the social impact. So from my perspective, working with smaller brands, smaller organizations, grassroots charities, activists is super, super important, because most of the time these guys drive bigger change. They're not that great at tracking because they don't have the capacities of the big companies, but actually they know their communities best. So they tend to drive the biggest impact. So I will tend to go for the underdog. And also, even in my career, I went from working with big corporates, advising big investors and large like C-suite companies to the startup world. So it kind of feeds nicely into my personal path as well. But yes, definitely underdog person.
Claire, what about you? I mean, you're working with a lot of big brands, so.
Yeah, we love working with the big brands. And I think one of the key things is they've got power. There's a lot of power in that size and that scale. And if they decide to change direction, and when they do, one of the examples we use is like a tanker. You know, it's a huge tanker and it's hard to turn it. But when you do turn it, it's got major, major power and it can really, move forward. As your kind of tiny speedboat zipping around, you can change direction very quickly, but you haven't necessarily got that power behind you. So I think there's important things on both sides, but for me, just personally, I love the agility of being the smaller company. I think it gives you the ability to change really quickly. It lets you respond much faster to things in the world that change. As the world changes around you, you're able to respond and be flexible. And that it creates a feeling of movement that I think it's probably really hard in big companies to create change and to feel part of that drive forward at the same pace, because it is just much, much harder to get things done. So I like the agility of the small.
Wonderful. So one last question from me, because the episode theme was find your way. And I have the feeling both of you find your way for your personal sustainability journey. Do you have any life hack that make it a little bit easier to start with a sustainable lifestyle?
I could take that one. I actually feel like I say that every day to everyone, but I think the very first thing to do is just to challenge yourself when you want to buy something and shift away from the perception of seeing yourself and people as consumers to seeing yourself as a citizen. And that makes a massive, massive difference to the way you behave, because then you start using your voice when something is not right. You start to ask questions to brands. But the very first thing is just to challenge yourself on, do I need this thing? Is there something in my life that already fills that purpose? And if yes, you will realize very, very quickly that sometimes we're just being like little hamsters, that we're being fed a lot of things. We think we need them, but actually no, like just resting and waiting like a day or so before making a purchase, most of the time you will just forget about it. So I think it's important to say that in your sustainability journey, it's not about buying sustainability. And I think we can't buy ourselves out of the mess we're in, unfortunately. So it's about moving away from that consumption mindset to that acting as just a responsible person, literally. And it's so easy to do, and it's less pressure on you to, I don't know, just do your due diligence, to buy the right thing. Because sometimes the easiest response is, actually, do I really need that?
Yes, great approach. Claire, would you like something to add?
My version of this is, I think, the thing that's made the biggest difference to me is surrounding myself with people who are challenging to me on this and talking to them about decisions. So that's people like Justine, it's my partner, it's making sure that you discuss your decisions with other people, because you make loads of decisions and it's very easy to always justify them to yourself. Like you can always find a story. I can find a story of why I need to go on that plane. I can find a story of why, you know, and I'm someone who's flown a lot in the last few years, a lot, because of my job. I've flown loads, and I feel like I can find ways to feel okay about that. And, you know, I'm carbon offsetting, and you can find ways to think about it. But when you have to talk about that with someone you care about, and they're challenging you with love, but they're challenging you, it actually becomes harder to justify it to yourself. And so for me, that's the thing that's made the biggest difference in the last, I would say the last 12 months for me, is finding more people around me who are happy to talk to me about it, and making an active choice to discuss my lifestyle and my decisions with them, so that I find it harder to turn a blind eye or to feel okay internally, even though there's some voice somewhere, and sometimes it's Justine's voice telling me that you know, maybe you need to have a bit of a rethink about this.
So this have been wonderful finished words, I would say. So thank you a lot that we learned a little bit more about you and a little bit more about your way, how you got a little bit more sustainable, and hopefully we will inspire our community to think a little bit more what we really need. And yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Thanks. It was fun.